Welcome to Story in English, where timeless romance is reborn. In this dramatic first chapter of The Lost One, Juliet Langdon returns to the windswept cliffs of her past after 10 long years, only to face the man who once shattered her heart, Marc Brandon. What secrets lie beneath the silence?
The wind was rising again. It blew in from the sea, sharp and cold, tugging at the hem of her coat as she stood at the edge of the cliff. Below her, the restless waves crashed against the rocks, white foam exploding like anger held too long. She felt like the sea, full of rage and sorrow, contained for years. And now, forced to return, she hadn't been here in 10 years. 10 years since she had left this place with nothing but her pride and a heart that refused to break, but did anyway. Now, she was back in the same village, back in the same pain. Her name was Juliet Langdon. 28 now, but she looked older somehow, not in years, but in weight. Her brown eyes held shadows no light could reach. Her dark hair was tied back with a scarf, and her lips rarely smiled anymore. She had left this village with tears in her eyes. She had returned with a storm in her chest, and then she heard it, a car. She turned. A black car slowly approached the old path near the cliff. It stopped not far behind her. She didn't need to see who was inside, she already knew. She could feel it in her spine, in her breath, in her bones. Marc Brandon, the man she had tried to forget, the man she had once loved, and the man who ruined everything. The car door opened. She didn't turn. She couldn't, not yet. His voice, low, cold, controlled, cut through the wind like a blade. So, you did come back. Juliet closed her eyes. But she would not let him see that. She turned slowly, lifting her chin. I had no choice. Marc didn't move. He simply stood there, coat open in the wind, his expression unreadable. His eyes searched her face like a man looking at a painting he couldn't decide whether to hate or adore. You didn't have to come back, he said finally, voice low. Juliet's mouth twisted slightly. Didn't I? You left on your own. And you let me. The silence that followed was louder than the crashing waves below. There was history in that silence, too much. Words unsaid. Nights forgotten. Promises broken and never explained. Marc took a step forward. His eyes, piercing, blue, like a frozen storm, didn't leave hers. What do you want, Juliet? She didn't answer. What did she want? She didn't come for forgiveness. She didn't believe in it anymore. She came because something inside her had pulled her back, like unfinished music. Like a story whose final page had been ripped out. She looked away. Toward the sea, the wind tore at her scarf again. I want peace, she whispered, a lie, or maybe a hope. He stepped closer now, his tone sharper. Then why come here? This place. It was never peaceful for us. Juliet turned slowly, facing him fully. She saw the man he had become, older, yes. Hardened. But still holding the fire that once burned her alive. You think I came for us? She almost laughed, but there was no humor in it. I came because your mother asked me to. That hit him. His jaw tightened, and for a moment, something flickered in his eyes. Regret? Pain? She couldn't tell anymore. She's dying, Juliet said quietly. Didn't you know? Marc looked away for the first time. His eyes shifted to the horizon where the sea met the sky, gray and endless. For a man who always had control, the mention of his mother seemed to strike something raw in him. When? He asked, barely audible. Soon, Juliet replied. She doesn't say it, but I can see it in her eyes. Marc said nothing. For a moment, they were both silent, two people who had burned each other once, now standing on ashes that still smoked. The past lay between them like a battlefield no one won. Juliet wrapped her arms around herself. She asked me to stay for a while, she said. She said you might not agree. He glanced at her now, sharply. Why would she ask you? A bitter edge crept into his voice. She knows what happened. She knows how you left. Juliet stood her ground. She also knows how I was left. The accusation hung in the air, and then, without warning, he stepped past her, brushing her shoulder, not harshly, not softly. Just enough to remind her that he was still the same man. And not, "I'll tell them to prepare your room," he said, and then, as if it cost him something, "My mother will be happy you're here." She turned to watch him walk toward the house. The tall, stone-fronted estate sat coldly on the hill, beautiful and distant, like the man who just walked back into it. Juliet remained on the cliff a moment longer, letting the wind carry away what strength she had left. Then she followed, back into the house, back into the past, back into everything she thought she had escaped. The house was exactly as she remembered it, and nothing like it at all. Juliet stepped inside slowly, each footfall echoing against the stone floors. The hallway stretched before her, grand and shadowed. The same portraits hung on the walls, proud ancestors with distant. Back into it, Juliet remained on the cliff a moment longer, letting the wind carry away what strength she had left. Then she followed, back into the house, back into the past, back into everything she thought she had escaped. The house was exactly as she remembered it, and nothing like it at all. Juliet stepped inside slowly, each footfall echoing against the stone floors. The hallway stretched before her, grand and shadowed. The same portraits hung on the walls, proud ancestors with distant
eyes, watching her return like a silent jury. She could still hear the sea from here. Faint but ever present. Like the past, Marc was already gone, disappeared deeper into the house as if walking away from memory itself. But Juliet knew where to go. She didn't need a guide. Her feet found their way as if no time had passed at all. At the end of the hall stood the woman who had once treated her like a daughter, Marc's mother, Marc Brandon, older now. Fragile. Her figure was thinner.
Her posture stooped, but her eyes were still sharp as ever. Eleanor gave her a faint smile. "You came." Juliet nodded, suddenly unsure of her voice. "I said I would." They stood in silence for a heartbeat too long. Then Eleanor opened her arms, not wide, but enough. Juliet stepped into them, into the kind of warmth she hadn't felt in years. For a moment, she allowed herself to believe nothing had changed. That the past hadn't burned everything down, but it had. And the scent of it
still lingered. Eleanor pulled back gently. "You look tired." Juliet gave a soft laugh. "It's been a long road." "I imagine it has." Eleanor studied her face. "You're stronger now." Juliet didn't know whether it was a compliment or a warning. "Come," Eleanor said, turning. "Let me show you your room." The room hadn't changed. Same soft wallpaper, same antique dresser, same wide window that opened to the sea. The bed was freshly made, but the air held a memory, hers. Juliet stood by the window, eyes drifting across the crashing waves. How strange, she thought. That walls could remember. This was where she used to dream, where she cried the night she left, where she had whispered his name like a prayer, before it turned into a scar. She sat on the edge of the bed and exhaled deeply. Downstairs, she could hear faint voices. Servants moving. Doors creaking. But no sound of Marc. Not yet. A knock broke the silence. Juliet turned quickly, heart skipping, but it wasn't him. A soft voice followed. "Miss Langdon?" It was Maria, the housemaid, older now, grayer, but still the same gentle face. She smiled shyly, holding a small tray. "Eleanor asked me to bring you some tea." Juliet softened. "Thank you, Maria." As Maria entered, she looked around the room wistfully. "It's been a long time, hasn't it?" Juliet nodded. "A lifetime." Maria set the tray down, hesitating. "I never believed you'd really gone. You always seemed like part of this place." Juliet gave a faint smile. "Parts can be removed." Maria blinked, unsure how to answer. Then she said, "If you need anything, I'm always around." Juliet watched her leave, then turned back to the window. The storm hadn't come yet, but it would. She could feel it in her blood, the wind, the silence, the weight of unspoken words, everything in this house. was waiting. Juliet remained by the window long after Maria left. The teacup sat untouched. Outside, clouds began to gather, slowly at first, like secrets forming. In the sky, the wind pushed harder against the glass. It reminded her of that night, the last one, when everything broke. Her hands clenched slightly at the memory. Marc hadn't spoken to her since their meeting on the cliff. Not a word. Not a glance. It was easier that way. Wasn't it? But even in silence, he was everywhere. In the hall. In the shadows. In the walls. She walked over to the dresser and opened the top drawer. Empty. Of course, but the scent, faint lavender and dust, hit her like a forgotten melody. She closed it quickly, then, suddenly, footsteps. Firm. Measured. Heading toward her door, her breath caught, a sharp knock. She didn't answer, a pause, then the door opened anyway. Marc stepped inside without apology, his expression unreadable. His presence filled the room instantly, like the return of a storm. She didn't move. Neither did he. I see you're settling in, he said finally. Juliet raised an eyebrow. Am I supposed to thank you for the room? He ignored the jab. My mother thinks it's good you're here. And you? I don't think at all when it comes to you, he said, voice edged with steel. That's the mistake I made once. The word struck her, but she didn't flinch. Not this time. I didn't come back for a fight, she said. Marc stepped closer. No, you came back for something else. But we both know, nothing here is free, Juliet. Her heart pounded. There he was, the man she once loved and feared in the same breath. Is calm. She turned on her side, eyes landing on the old wardrobe. That wardrobe, 1,000 memories lived inside its silence. Her dress the night of the charity ball. The sweater she stole from Marc's drawer and never returned. The scent of cologne she hated, but wore because it was his. She closed her eyes, but it didn't help. Suddenly, the past came rushing in, like water through a broken dam. Flashback, 2 years ago. It was raining that night. Juliet stood at the door of this same room. She heard his footsteps before she saw him. Slow. Measured. The sound of leather shoes against the hardwood floor echoed through the hallway. Her breath caught as the door swung open without a knock. There he was. Tall. Dark. The same man who had once made her feel safe, now made her feel like a stranger. Marc didn't speak at first. He only stood in the doorway, watching her, his expression unreadable. You've been quiet, she said, her voice tight. I didn't expect this silence from you. His jaw tightened at her words. Some things are better left unsaid. Juliet's heart raced, but she refused to show it. You think that's true? After everything? Marc took a step forward. Some things aren't meant to be said aloud, Juliet. We both know that. She stood her ground. We can't keep pretending like nothing happened. Marc's eyes flickered for a moment, a crack in his hardened exterior. But just as quickly, it was gone. I didn't come here to argue, he said, his voice low. I came because she wanted us both here. For her. For a second, she almost believed him. Almost, but then, her heart shattered once again. Don't, she whispered, stepping back. Don't bring her into this. Marc's gaze softened, but there was no apology in his eyes. Only a deep, quiet regret. He walked toward the door again, pausing before leaving. Don't leave, she said in a voice she barely recognized. But it was too late. He was gone, and Juliet was left in
the silence. Juliet didn't sleep that night. She wandered the house like a ghost, barefoot, silent, the weight of memory pressing against her skin. Every hallway whispered fragments of the past. Every corner held a shadow she'd rather forget. She found herself in the music room. It had been closed for years, but the door creaked open easily. Dust floated in the air like ash. The grand piano still stood in the center, untouched, gleaming in the moonlight. Her fingers hovered over the keys. She used to play here. Before everything, she sat, pressed one key, a soft note, hollow, echoing. Behind her, a voice broke the silence. "You always played when you were upset." Marc, he leaned against the doorway, arms crossed, watching her with an expression that was unreadable. Again, Juliet's voice was barely more than a whisper. "Some things haven't changed." Marc stepped into the room. "I used to think the music helped you forget." She looked up at him. "Did it?" He didn't answer. Instead, he moved closer. Too close, Juliet stood, but didn't step away. They were inches apart now, breathing the same air, burning in the same silence. "You hurt me," she said. "And I hurt you. But pretending it never happened doesn't make it go away." Marc's jaw clenched. "I never wanted to forget. I wanted to survive." His hand reached up, almost touching her cheek, but he stopped. She closed her eyes anyway, and when she opened them, he was already walking out the door. The morning came gray and unforgiving. Juliet sat in the small garden behind the estate, her fingers curled tightly around a cup of untouched coffee. The sky above was low with clouds, but it wasn't the weather that pressed on her, it was what hadn't been said. The night before still lingered in her veins. She didn't turn when she heard him approach, but she knew it was him. Marc stopped behind her. "Silent, finally," she said. "If you're here to pretend again, don't bother." His voice was calm. "Too calm. I'm not pretending." She looked up, her eyes tired but burning. "Then say it. Whatever it is you've buried all these years." He exhaled, slow and heavy. "I hated you for leaving," he said. "I told myself I didn't care, that you were a mistake." She blinked, once, but didn't move. Marc crouched beside her, voice low now. "But I never stopped thinking about you. Even when I wished I could." Juliet stared at him, the edges of her heart cracking open. "You made it impossible to stay," she said. "You pushed me out before I ever walked away. I was angry. Lost." His voice trembled now. "You were the only thing that felt real, and I didn't know how to keep you without ruining you." Tears stung her eyes, but she held them back. "You already did," she whispered. He reached for her hand, not demanding, but gently, slowly, and for the first time. She didn't pull away. Juliet stood up abruptly, breaking the fragile contact of their hands. The pain, the longing, the fear, it was all too close now. She turned away from him, arms crossed tightly over her chest as if holding herself together. "I came back for your mother," she said, her voice trembling. That was all. Marc didn't move. "I know," he replied, but there was something hollow in his voice. Something final. She faced him again, eyes shining but hard. "We can't go back, Marc. No matter what we feel. We're not those people anymore." He stepped closer. "Maybe not. But what I feel for you hasn't changed." Her throat tightened. "Love doesn't fix everything," she whispered. "No," he agreed. "But it's the only thing that's ever made the rest worth surviving." There was silence, not empty, but full. Charged. Then, Eleanor's voice echoed faintly from the house, calling Marc's name. He hesitated. She nodded toward the door. "Go." He looked at her a moment longer. Then turned and left. Juliet stood alone in the garden, the wind pulling at her hair, her heart in pieces again. But this time, the pieces were hers to gather, and maybe, just maybe, she was ready to try. The days passed with a strange stillness. Juliet moved through the house like someone trying not to wake old ghosts. She spent time with Eleanor, helped the house staff, avoided Marc when she could, and thought about him when she couldn't. His presence haunted the halls, but it was no longer sharp and bitter. Now it was softer, worn by time, shaped by regret. One afternoon, Juliet found herself in the library. The rain had returned, soft and steady, tapping against the high windows. She ran her fingers along the spines of old books, most untouched for years. She pulled one, Wuthering Heights, and smiled. It had been her favorites. "You always liked the tragedies," said a voice behind her. She turned. Marc was leaning on the doorway, arms folded, his eyes not angry anymore, just tired. Juliet didn't smile. But she didn't flinch either. "I used to think love had to be painful. To be real," she said softly. He stepped into the room. "And now?" "Now I think love should be safe. Steady." Something you can come home to." There was silence, then Marc said, "I don't know how to be that." Juliet looked up at him, something breaking in her expression. "Then we'll always be lost." She moved to leave, but this time, he didn't let her. His hand caught her wrist, gently. "Juliet," he said, his voice barely above a breath. "I don't want to lose you again." She looked
down. Then slowly, into his eyes. Neither spoke, because maybe, for the first time, they didn't need to. Juliet didn't pull her hand away, not this time. The weight of years, of anger, silence, and things left unsaid lingered in the space between them. But now, there was also something else. Something softer. She spoke first, voice trembling. "I never stopped loving you, Marc." His breath caught, "But I couldn't keep loving someone who kept shutting me out." Marc looked down,
his thumb brushing gently over her wrist. "I didn't know how to let you in. I thought keeping you at a distance would protect you. From me." Juliet shook her head. "It didn't protect me. It destroyed me." Her eyes filled with tears, but this time, she didn't hide them. Marc stepped closer, their foreheads nearly touching. His voice dropped to a whisper. "I've lived every day since regretting the words I didn't say. The touch I held back. The nights I let you cry alone." She closed her eyes, the pain and love colliding in her chest like a wave. "I didn't come back for this," she said. "But maybe I needed to." He gently cupped her face. "Maybe I did too." There was a pause, a heartbeat, then, slowly, carefully, he kissed her, not like before, not desperate, but honest. Raw. Real. When they pulled apart, there was only silence between them, but it was no longer empty, it was full of hope. The rain had stopped by the time Juliet and Marc stepped out onto the garden terrace. The sky had softened into a misty gray, and the earth smelled of renewal. The storm had passed, outside and, perhaps, within them. They didn't speak much. Sometimes love doesn't need noise, just presence. Juliet sat on the old stone bench where she had cried once, the day she'd left. Now, Marc sat beside her, not too close, not too far. The silence between them was different now. Gentle. "I used to sit here," she said, almost to herself. "The day after I ran. I imagined this place empty. Like me." Marc looked down, his hands resting on his knees. "I used to come here after dark. Every night. Hoping maybe you'd come back." Juliet turned to him. "Did you think I would?" He hesitated, then nodded. "I never stopped waiting." They were quiet again, then Juliet reached for his hand. It wasn't dramatic. Not rushed, just fingers finding fingers. "After all this time, I don't know what happens next," she said. "But I want it to be with you." Marc looked at her. "Then that. Enough for me." They sat like that for a long time, two broken people, trying again, not from the beginning, but from now. That night, the house was quiet. Juliet sat alone in Eleanor's room, the fire flickering softly. The older woman was asleep in her bed, peaceful for the first time in days. Juliet tucked the blanket gently around her and stood by the window, watching the moon drift behind thin clouds. Then she heard the door creak open. Marc, he didn't speak right away. He just walked in and stood beside her. There was no anger, no tension, just silence. And something waiting beneath it. "I think you deserve the truth," he said finally. Juliet turned to face him, her eyes steady. "I do." He looked down. It wasn't just fear or pride. "That night, before you left, I got a letter from your father." Juliet froze. "My father?" Marc nodded. "He made it very clear. If I didn't end things with you, he'd destroy everything. My family. My mother. Our business. He had power." She stared at him, stunned. "You didn't tell me." "I thought I was protecting you," he said. "I thought if I pushed you away, you'd hate me, and be safe." Juliet shook her head, tears forming. "You let me think it was my fault." Marc's voice cracked. Because it was easier than telling you that I gave you up to survive. She turned away, breath shaking. All these years. All that pain. And we never knew the same truth. I know, he whispered. He stepped closer. But I'm not afraid. Anymore. Juliet faced him again, the final wall between them crumbling, and this time. She didn't cry, she smiled, not because it didn't hurt, but because it finally made sense. He reached for her hand, and she held it, not out of habit, but by choice. Outside, the wind quieted. Inside, two hearts began again. The end. Juliet Marc, not what they were, but who they chose to become, together. Finally.